In the icy darkness beyond our solar system, Voyager 2 sent back a signal unlike anything we had ever received. What began as a strange signal from the depths of space has evolved into a chilling mystery that challenges everything we thought we knew about the void. It sent a message. A message that was not only unusual, it was inexplicable. At first, the engineers monitoring Voyager 2 thought it was a malfunction. After all, the probe is aging. It had been exposed to cosmic radiation, micrometeorites, and the brutal cold of interstellar space for nearly 50 years. Systems fail, parts wear out, glitches happen. But this was different. The incoming signal wasn't just distorted or noisy. It was distorted in a way that didn't match any known error patterns. It was fragmented, strangely structured, and deeply laced with interference that seemed intelligent. When the signal arrived, no one could decode it. It was as if Voyager 2 had begun speaking in a language no one had taught it, a language never before used on Earth. And then something even stranger happened. As engineers analyzed the data, they found the signal's source couldn't be attributed to any known system failure. In fact, Voyager itself seemed to be functioning normally. Its alignment was correct, its instruments were operational, and the signal was strong. But the method of data transmission had changed. It was coming from an onboard computer system that hadn't been used in decades, long considered obsolete, inactive, and forgotten. This wasn't just a routing error. It was a deliberate choice, as if the probe had selected a different path for communication. But who or what had made that choice? For nearly 5 decades, Voyager 2 had followed commands with robotic precision, never deviating, never thinking for itself. Yet this sudden shift happened unprompted, with no signal from Earth instructing it to behave this way. The probe had rerouted its primary communication channel through an old, unused subsystem, one that shouldn't even be capable of handling complex telemetry data. That alone was unsettling. But what happened next made the anomaly even more disturbing. Strange signal incoming, subscribe to not miss the weirdest space story of all time. When the engineers examined the transmission logs, they noticed something hidden deep within the corrupted data. The signal wasn't just garbled or unreadable, it had a pattern. The distortion followed a precise rhythm, suggesting deliberate control. Embedded within these patterns was a recurring low-frequency pulse. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. Every 744 seconds, the signal echoed a faint, rhythmic throb, almost like a heartbeat. It swelled and faded, sometimes strong, sometimes barely detectable, but it never stopped. They tried everything to stop it, resets, overrides, software reboots, but nothing worked. The heartbeat pulsed on, unaffected by their efforts. At first, some thought it was interference, a kind of software feedback loop reflecting Voyager's internal systems. But closer analysis revealed something far more terrifying. The pulse wasn't coming from inside the probe at all. It was coming from outside. The signal was being received by something beyond Voyager, beyond our solar system, not transmitted. That changed everything. The idea that Voyager 2, our distant mechanical emissary, might be interacting with something beyond Earth, a structure, an intelligence, or a phenomenon far more complex than we imagined, sent the scientific community into a mix of excitement and unease. Because despite all our planning, all our predictions, all our brilliant engineering, there was one thing no one had ever considered: what if Voyager didn't just venture into space, but into a place where something was already listening? With each new data stream, the mystery deepened. It wasn't just interference. It wasn't just space dust, magnetic storms, or cosmic coincidences. There was method to it, there was memory. It was as if Voyager 2 had stumbled into a conversation, one it hadn't started, and now something was speaking through it, or, perhaps even more unsettling, speaking through us. What began as a technical glitch quickly became something else entirely. A message. A mystery. Perhaps even a warning. And as the signal continued to pulse, heartbeat by heartbeat, a question emerged like a whisper from the void. What has Voyager 2 really found? The signal didn't fade. It persisted, constant and unwavering, like a faint knock on a door no one remembered building. At first, engineers hoped it would simply stop, that it was a temporary glitch or cosmic interference. But Voyager 2 kept transmitting, and the heartbeat kept echoing. The team began running simulations, reconstructing the exact sequence of events that led to the anomaly. They desperately searched for a hardware cause, a software error, or anything that could explain what was happening. But there was no explanation. Instead, something even more enigmatic was uncovered. When NASA's old software, the original systems used to decode Voyager's early transmissions, was dusted off and repurposed for analysis, a hidden pattern began to emerge in the corrupted data. It wasn't noise. It wasn't random. It was structured. Buried within the telemetry errors were binary packets with sequences that hadn't been used since the probe's launch over 45 years ago. These weren't part of its current programming. These sequences belonged to Voyager's childhood, so to speak, a time when it had just left Earth, freshly programmed and full of potential. The system wasn't just malfunctioning, it seemed to have reset, accessing memories buried deep in its hardware, dormant for decades. But that wasn't the most disturbing discovery. Embedded within these binary patterns were strange markers, geometric signals, repeating hexagonal formations that researchers visualized as digital crop circles. Rekursive, fractal-like shapes that mirrored patterns in nature, honeycombs, snowflakes, even Saturn's polar vortex, but never before seen in machine language. No one had programmed Voyager to send these. No system on Earth recognized the markers. And yet, they were there, woven into the transmission like fingerprints in the noise. Even more unsettling was the timing. The data packets were time-stamped, metadata Voyager attaches to every signal to track when it was recorded. But these timestamps didn't match. They weren't from the current date, not even from Voyager's internal clock. They were offset, floating, detached from any fixed point in time. It was as if the signal itself had passed through something temporal. Something that altered not just the signal's content but the moment of its creation. One engineer put it simply, we didn't just receive a transmission. We received a message. A message outside of time. Around this time, the tone within NASA began to shift. This anomaly was no longer treated as a minor technical hiccup. Internal memos grew cryptic. Access to data logs was restricted. Analysts working on the waveform patterns were quietly reassigned. Independent researchers who had previously collaborated with NASA were cut off. Some even received formal cease and desist orders to halt all work related to Voyager's recent signal. A veil was drawn. The incident had escalated from public curiosity to a matter of national sensitivity. Internally, it was called Event V2X. Officially, it was said the issue was resolved, that engineers had successfully rerouted Voyager's signal back to the proper channels. But those who had seen the raw data knew better. Because in the hours after the rerouting, before new firewalls were put in place, one final data fragment slipped through. A single pulse sequence, unlike anything Voyager had ever sent before. When converted to audio, it wasn't just noise or static. It was harmonic. Tonal. A deep, rising hum that repeated in layered intervals, like an organ playing beneath the silence of space. And beneath that tone, researchers identified a series of frequency modulations that echoed something eerily familiar, parts of the Arecibo message, the 1974 transmission sent from Earth to the stars, encoded and then altered. Who or what had altered it was unknown. But the message had been touched. Modified. Someone or something had not only received it but sent it back, edited. At this point, the scientific debate began to fray. Some called it pareidolia, humans seeing patterns where none exist. They argued it was coincidence, a natural effect of interstellar magnetic fields or particle interactions distorting the signal. But others saw something else. The structure. The pulse. The activation of dead systems. The mimicry of Earth's communication. These weren't artifacts of chaos. They were deliberate. Coordinated. Purposeful. Voyager 2, it seemed, hadn't just drifted into space. It had touched something structured. Something with rules. With memory. And with the ability to notice us. The probe had crossed the heliopause, the boundary where our sun's influence wanes and true interstellar space begins. But perhaps that boundary wasn't just about energy or particles. Perhaps it was more. A barrier. A veil. Or a threshold. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't meant to be crossed. For the first time in history, we had a signal not just from space, but from something deeper. And as Voyager continued its silent journey into the unknown, the hum remained, echoing back to Earth like the breath of something vast, ancient, and awake. Behind the scenes, NASA quietly shifted into containment mode. Communication protocols were tightened. Incoming signals from Voyager 2 were rerouted through isolated data channels. Only select personnel had access. Gone were the days of public updates, raw data released for citizen scientists to study. What had once been a beacon of transparency had become a controlled access event. The message, whatever it was, had changed how Voyager was handled. It was no longer just an aging spacecraft drifting through the void. It had become something else. A witness. A vessel. Perhaps even a messenger. But while NASA's official silence grew louder, others weren't so easily deterred. A loose coalition of independent researchers, former insiders, and amateur astronomers began piecing together what fragments they could find. Quietly, they compared Voyager's strange sequences to other unexplained phenomena. The VOW signal from 1977, one of the most famous radio bursts ever received. Mysterious fast radio bursts, FABS, recorded in recent decades, some repeating with eerie regularity. When overlaid and filtered through specialized spectrographic analysis, patterns began to emerge not in the words or the tone, but in the rhythm. The timing. Ratios. Prime number intervals. Echoes of structured intelligence hiding in the pulse of space. The implications were staggering. Could these far-flung signals, decades apart and from entirely different corners of the cosmos, be part of the same phenomenon? Were we not just hearing isolated echoes, but different expressions of the same underlying voice? More questions arose as analysts rechecked the rerouted signal logs. There, buried beneath the corrupted data, was something even stranger, a command path within Voyager that had never been used during its entire mission. A routine embedded in the software, designed solely for early diagnostics in case of an Earth-based system reboot, had activated. But this command didn't come from Earth. It didn't come from Voyager either. It had simply triggered. As if something external had reached into the probe's memory and deliberately chosen that path. Not by chance. Not by error. With intent. Want to know what happens next? Watch this video here.